The Nintendo Switch has done so much good for Nintendo overall, but I think the biggest thing that most people don't talk about has to be how it ended up saving Mario's legacy. The NES was a phenomenal breakout for Mario, and the SNES followed it up very well with Super Mario World. Then we got Mario 64 on the N64, we got Mario Sunshine, and then we got a bunch of different 2D and 3D games relatively soon after that on the Wii. You got the new Super Mario Bros. Series, Mario Galaxy 2, then onward to the Wii U. That was where things started to take a little bit of a nosedive, not necessarily for the worst, but for the bland, if that makes sense. Mario stopped becoming innovative and fun and amazing and just started becoming vanilla and okay, and this is what we expected kind of version of Mario. Mario stopped becoming what we all knew he was and could be and started being what Nintendo believed he should be. I'm reminded of the Sonic series and how that series has just been so stagnant for such a long time. If you ask a Sonic fan what their favorite Sonic game is, you will get a different answer from every single person, and not necessarily because every single game is amazing, just because it hasn't changed all that much and the gameplay isn't as good as a lot of people would want it to be. Not to say Sonic is a bad franchise, but that it just happens to be bland. It just so happens to be what everybody expects it to be, what Sega thinks it should be, and it doesn't try to be anything different. It doesn't try to innovate, it doesn't try to expand, it doesn't try to be better. It just continues being what it is, and that is fine. But it could be so much more. Let's look at the list of Mario games that I'm talking about here so I can make it a little bit more clear to you what I mean by Nintendo saving Mario's legacy with the Nintendo Switch and why it wasn't going to be such a good outcome for Mario's legacy if they had continued with this lineage of games. Right off the heels of Super Mario Sunshine, the very next Mario game we got in either the 2D or 3D franchise was New Super Mario Bros. In 2006. This came after there was a little bit of criticism from Sunshine. It was a little janky, not super fun. They kind of made it quote-unquote too open for people. Sunshine was just divisive in general for a lot of people, and even though people loved the sandbox style, there were just too many frustrating things about the game that Nintendo had yet to really hammer out. So they decided to go back to the drawing board with both their 2D and 3D franchises here. Now, we're going to start off with New Super Mario Bros. In 2006. New Soup came after people were trying to figure out what the next 2D games were going to be, and the developers decided, let's just go back to our roots, let's make it where it used to be, except better. The NES Mario, Super Mario Bros., except modern day. New power-ups, new levels, better graphics, that is what New Soup was setting out to be. And it's still probably the best New Soup game in the series if you ask the vast majority of people. It was pretty creative, had a lot of different original level designs, a lot of different cool power-ups that never came back, like the Koopa shell. That was such a cool power-up, Nintendo. Why don't you bring that back? There was a lot of good about it, but there was also a lot of bland about it because there's only so much you can do with the 2D style in that direction, and they ended up going as far as they could with that later on. But before we get to those games, it's Super Mario Galaxy time. In 2007, Nintendo really went the other direction from Sunshine. I love Sunshine, I love 64, but Super Mario Galaxy is when 3D Mario started to feel really, really good. Super Mario Galaxy is the perfect example of a game gone right, and they knew after Sunshine they just wanted to get back to the basics. That is the theme of this decade here, back to basics. And yes, that can be phenomenal at times. You can really create such innovative experiences that way. But I think there's a problem behind Mario Galaxy's philosophy that a lot of people don't seem to notice, and that creeped out into the rest of the series, just seeped into all of those games moving forward. Mario Galaxy, for all of its strengths, had one big flaw: its linearity, and it really did lean into that, and that is totally fine, and I love that game. It is one of the best 3D platformers, one of the best games ever made. But with Mario and Zelda at the same time, funny enough, Nintendo decided that linearity was the way to go, so that way they could craft more defined, more elegant, and just better experiences overall, so that way the player wouldn't have to encounter weird bugs like in Sunshine, weird things that just weren't fun, and weird things overall. Linearity is both a blessing and a curse, because the designers get to craft every little bit of your experience. They get to craft exactly when and where you experience one thing, when you get to feel one thing, where you're going to be at in this area, etc. But it also means that the player is really just kind of following along the breadcrumb trail. They don't really get to pick where they're going to go. They don't have freedom in their experience. They just go along the set path. and there are so many games that do this perfectly, and I think Galaxy is one of them. Don't get me wrong, Galaxy is a perfect example of how to do linearity correctly. But moving forward is where we see the problem. So yes, I love Mario Galaxy, but let's move on to something else I think you will agree with me with here. New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 2009. This game introduced the first 2D Mario game with actual 4-player multiplayer. The first multiplayer 2D Mario game ever, and it was perfect because the Wii was big on family, right? You had a lot of people huddling around the TV with their Wii remotes, shaking the Wii, and like the helicopter ability that you had, you could like fly up to the top. Oh my goodness, it was so much fun, but it was really the start of a lot of blandness in this series at large. It started a bunch of different trends that continued in a bunch of different Mario games. You had 8 worlds, lava themed at the very end, grass theme at the start, you had a desert, and then the ice world, and then everything else in between, all of these different themes that they continued to pull from every single game. It started to feel like they were copying and pasting the exact same game over and over and over again. And sure, it was really fun at the time and sold amazingly well, but looking back, we continue to see how if this is how Mario would have been forever, his legacy would certainly have been tainted. To go from the guy who took us out of the arcade era of video games, out of the Pong era of video games, to actual platforming, playing as a character that you love in a 3D environment for the first time with Mario 64, I mean, this guy had a high expectation whenever his games released. Mario was known for breaking barriers, for breaking boundaries, just absolutely blowing our minds. And honestly, they kind of did that in 2010 with Super Mario Galaxy 2. I love this game, but once again, we see the linearity began to seep in and start to choke the fan base. If we're talking about gameplay alone here, I think Super Mario Galaxy 2 absolutely takes the cake from Super Mario Galaxy, but the level design is so much more linear. And if you look at the very start of the game, in between the hub world, the whole thing is just gone. The story of Rosalina in the first game, the heartwarming moments, the storybook that they actually read in the game with all the cute Lumas, it's gone. All in favor of Starship Mario, and you have Lubba, which I love Lubba, justice for Lubba, but I just can't help but see how a lot of other people agree with me that they really miss the idea of a hub world. Nintendo started to think, let's go only with fun, only with what is best for the gameplay, and they were like, well, what's better for gameplay than just putting it on a world map where you just select it on top of some weird floating area and you get right back into the gameplay as fast as humanly possible. Which, sure, obviously you want to get right back into the game that you're playing as soon as you can, but taking a moment to rest, looking around at the environment around you, building that lore with the characters and the world, it's just so important to a game's atmosphere, and Super Mario Galaxy absolutely nailed that galaxy feel, that space loneliness. But in Super Mario Galaxy 2, I feel as though it just doesn't scratch the same itch for me, and it's still a phenomenal game, one of the highest rated games of all time, and deservingly so, but we can begin to see how this philosophy would end up choking a lot of the other creativity in the later games. Case in point, 2011 Super Mario 3D Land. This game gets all kinds of crap from people and has a lot of adamant defenders as well, but this game was essentially a 2D Mario platformer in 3D. That was it. There was not a whole lot of creativity to be found, especially in the first 8 worlds. The secret 8 worlds after the final boss is pretty good, but at the same time, you have to consider most people aren't even going to get to that point. I mean, if people don't enjoy the initial gameplay loop and how boring it can be and how bland Mario really was in that game, with not many power-ups and the Tanuki suit being the big thing, I understand why a lot of people would have just totally dropped the game after World 2 or 3. Miyamoto was taking over more than ever, saying, fun, gameplay, fun, fun, fun. We gotta focus on what is fun, and that's platforming. They want platforming, right? And yes, we do. We want fun, we want platforming, we want simple designs, but we also want creativity. We want a little bit of world building. We want characters that are vibrant and colorful and have emotions and feelings, and just world environments and NPCs that actually make us feel like this place is real. But 3D Land more than ever just felt like it was in some random place at a random time, and it's not a real world, and it's not actually connected, and no one really cared about anything other than jumping up and down and stomping on Goombas, which yes, that is the point of the game, but there could have been so much more. Here is the stretch that I find really would have ended up destroying the entirety of Mario's legacy if it had continued on. In 2012, we have New Super Mario Bros. 2 on the 3DS, and that game pretty much was just a follow-up to New Soup on the DS, except it was just themed around coins. Coins, of all things. Why in the world did they just randomly theme games around the most obvious but weird ideas? Okay, sure, the first New Soup was an idea that I think was pretty good at the time and ended up selling well enough to justify the means to the end. Super Mario Bros. Was amazing on the NES, and they wanted to kind of recreate that 2D formula in a modern gameplay and graphical style for the DS at the time. Then they moved on to New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Okay, cool. It's just kind of more of the same with different levels. I loved that game. It's probably my personal favorite of the New Soup series. But then they also introduced multiplayer with that, and that was kind of the gimmick for that game. Then New Super Mario Bros. 2, and the gimmick is nothing. It's just more of the same except coins, and you collect a bunch of coins, and that's the point, and there's really nothing to it. You just collect coins, and there's a big counter, and that's it. It was just an excuse for another 2D Mario game. Then we had New Super Mario Bros. U, also in 2012 for the Wii U, and that game literally was just another 2D Mario game, except there are little Yoshis this time, and oh, by the way, after the first world, you're never really going to use them again, so just forget that anyways. It's just more 2D Mario, baby. Levels are kind of cool, and it's the first HD Mario game of all time, but sure, it's just more 2D Mario, and that's exactly what everybody wants. Nobody wants creativity, nobody wants something new, nobody wants anything innovative. They just want more of the same, and it proves it, right? Because we sold these two games in the exact same year. They had crazy gumption to do that. New Super Mario Bros. U is not my favorite game, although I enjoyed it at the time when it came out as a kid. Looking back, I cannot imagine how I enjoyed it as much as I did, knowing more about the gaming industry and just about how Mario ended up being at the time. And it kind of felt like they were going for more quantity over quality, which is so unfortunate and unlike Nintendo at large, because in 2013, they released the 5th 2D Mario game in less than 7 years, New Super Luigi U. Now this game was kind of a spin-off because every single level was only 100 seconds long, and the seconds weren't actually seconds, they moved really quickly, so you were kind of speed running through every level, and Luigi was slippery and jumped really high, and it's honestly a really fun interpretation of the bland 2D style of Mario. It's just really unfortunate that that game obviously released on the Wii U, and after the original standard 2D Mario, Super Mario Bros. U, so it didn't sell well at all. It was a part of the big Year of Luigi thing, and that was kind of weird as well, but I wish this game had sold better because I hope that they continue to do weird and wacky things just like this, but obviously they ended up continuing that legacy with Wonder, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But Luigi U was so much fun. It was totally unique, it was different, it was great, it was a great refresher. But I think because a lot of people didn't buy Wii U's, and also just the burnout of 2D games at large, I mean, we had New Super Bros. On the DS in 2006, then we had New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 2009, we had stinking Super Mario Bros. 2 on 2012, and U in 2012 as well, and then a year after that, they decided, hey, here's another 2D Mario game, except with Luigi. It was a great idea, just a bad time. There was so much burnout from the fans, and I think internally from Mario developers as well. Then in 2013, we got a phenomenal Mario game, but that still was hampered by the linearity type of legacy. Super Mario 3D World came out in 2013. It is one of my favorite games ever made. The Switch version is a lot better than this version, but still, this version is phenomenal. It took 3D Land and just made it so much better. The levels are a lot more in-depth. The game looks beautiful. There are way more power-ups, and you can play as different characters with different attributes. Every single level has a bunch of collectibles to find. There are green stars, again, from 3D Land. Then there are stamps for the Wii U. You could use it with Miiverse. It was so much fun, but at the same time, you gotta look at this game and say, if they continue to do more and more like this, kind of like the Sonic series, just not really changing a whole lot, but doing different iterations of the same concept, I could see how Mario would not end up being as legendary as he is right now. Then in 2015, we had Super Mario Maker, also on the Wii U. This game was extremely creative, but only because the whole point was you make the levels, not Nintendo. They were kind of saying, hey, we've heard all the criticism, we've heard everything you've said about our 2D games, y'all make your own. And I think at that point, they had kind of wondered, how in the world are we going to make another 2D game after this? Because if people keep making these amazing, creative, beautiful levels in this game, why would we ever sell something else that's kind of less than? Well, they answered that question about a year later with Super Mario Run in 2016 on smartphones. This has always felt as somewhat of a panic move to me, because this is when they were obviously flopping with the Wii U, and then they decided, let's go to mobile to maybe get a piece of that pie and help recoup some of our losses, and that just didn't end up working super well for them. Obviously, the mobile side of Nintendo did not work out very well, and they have not made a lot of different mobile games since then, and honestly, for good reason. For whatever reason, their philosophy was, if you can't play it with just one hand, we don't want you to play it at all, and that was so weird. They were just trying to ease into the idea of, hey, you guys don't even have to really focus playing this game, and I thought that was odd. Like, the reason you're playing a smartphone game is because you want to have a good time and probably distract yourself from other things happening. So why wouldn't I want to try to engage more with your game by using both my hands and my brain at the same time? They also decided to put a paywall with this game, which was a whole other discussion, but still, different types of mobile games like this just did not work out for Nintendo. Can you imagine if the future of Mario was just more and more and more of this? If they had continued with the new Super Mario Bros. Style every single year and we got those games all the time? If the 3D world, 3D land style was all they ever did, and they kept iterating on that same idea with different power-ups and different level designs? I mean, sure, a lot of people would love that. It would be really fun. But after 10, 20 years of this, don't you think it would get extremely bland? This is where the core of my argument lies. Now, let's move on to the Nintendo Switch and how I believe it saved Mario's legacy. They went back to the drawing board and said, what do we do to innovate? What do we do to make the franchise and the series and the genre we are in better and better? How are we going to make other companies want to copy us for the next decade? Their answer was Super Mario Odyssey. This game is a mix of what makes every single 3D Mario game good. The people that loved the overworld maps in Mario Galaxy 2 in 3D Land and somewhat in 3D World would kind of have this back with an actual world that you could select the levels, quote unquote, that you go to every single time. For those who wanted a hub world and more lore overall and world building, the actual level design of each and every area was enough to scratch that itch, and if you wanted a place to just rest and hang out with your companions, the Odyssey fulfilled that. Not to mention the gameplay was better than ever. Mario has never felt slicker, he has never felt more fun to control, and of course the Cappy mechanic changed everything. One of the biggest detriments of Mario is that he's just kind of like a normal guy who gets random power-ups in this crazy world, and if you think of it like that and you only ever think, okay, he's going to be a random guy who doesn't have a ton of powers and he just jumps, that could get really boring really fast if you don't innovate off of that idea. Power-ups are not enough. They decided there needs to be a gameplay mechanic that they add to the core of this game to make it unique. Cappy was that mechanic. The capture mechanic was what they needed to make that reality. Super Mario Odyssey fulfills every single thing someone could ever want in a 3D Mario game, and the biggest complaints I ever hear from it is there's too much stuff. There's too much stuff? Are you kidding me? If you don't want to get all the stuff, then don't get all the stuff. Just get what you need to get to the end of the game. The whole point is that you do what you want and you have fun in your own way. The linearity is still kind of there though, in a better way than it was before, because with a lot of the main quests, you have to do specific things in order. It's not open world. I mean, New Donk City is the perfect example of this. You get there and it's dark and it's scary and there's all these weird dudes around and it's raining and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I saw in the marketing material. And then you have to go and defeat the boss before the world opens up to you. That's a very linear structure, but they decided to make it linear and then a little bit more sandboxy. I can see how this would appeal to every single type of person if you were really trying hard enough. And then of course on the Nintendo Switch there were a bunch of sports games which were pretty controversial. And listen, this video has really been about 2D and 3D games in the Mario series, but I have to talk about these sports games at least a little bit because oh my goodness, Mario Tennis Aces is so much better than whatever the heck they were trying to do on the Wii U and even on the Wii. Like, they really just ported that same tennis game from the GameCube onto the Wii, then they made that crappy Wii U version. Like, this game is leagues leagues better than all of the other Mario Tennis games that we had prior, and I am a huge Mario Tennis fan. In particular, I loved like the golf game on this console as well, and I know Battle League just wasn't as good, and that's fine, but they had plenty of quality sports games compared to what we have had in the past. And even if we're disappointed with this, we're only disappointed with this because of how the 2D and 3D games have become so much more higher quality. And in the past, if you would compare Mario Tennis Aces to whatever the heck they were putting on the Wii U, you would totally see how much better this is. So even if you aren't a fan of these sports games, even if Tennis Aces was a little bit bland for you personally, for me and for the people who actually really enjoyed the tennis series and the sports series, these games are way better than what had come before, and it's just another example for me personally on how the Nintendo Switch saved Mario's overall legacy. And of course, I could also talk about all of the other spin-offs like the Mario Party series, the Mario Kart series, and Mario Party, sure, it totally faltered, and it's another example of how the Switch just saved Mario once again. Mario Party is back better than ever on the Nintendo Switch. It was horrible on the Wii and Wii U, except for Mario Party 8 maybe, but outside of that, you could really see the downward trend in all of these different franchises, and the only Mario franchise that I think did not miss a beat in a single installment is the Mario Kart series, and on the Nintendo Switch, they really just kept on with that Wii U game, Mario Kart 8, except it was the deluxe version. They added a battle mode, they made it way better, they gave it DLC, it's the ultimate Mario Kart experience. So even then, Mario Kart never lost a step, but on the Nintendo Switch, it was better than ever. Super Mario Maker 2 came out in 2019. It innovated off of the first game, added so much more content. They took the idea of making 2D levels and then added 3D world into it on top of it, which was so much fun. It was basically Mario Maker, but better. And of course, the gamepad wasn't there with the Nintendo Switch, so a lot of people felt that creating levels wasn't as fun, but playing them once they were created was obviously amazing. And yes, this is another example of a linear game, and I am not at all saying linear games are bad. Don't ever take away from this video that linearity is bad, but what you should take away is, in supplement to other types of things, do I think linearity is great. Once you have Super Mario Maker 2 full of creative linearity in between a game like Mario Odyssey and later on Mario Wonder, that is when I start to say, yes, I understand why this game exists and why people love it. And for people looking for that new soup style, it's obviously going to be in this game forever with infinite levels. So please, if you complain about this video or about other games, go buy Super Mario Maker 2 and play endless amounts of levels to your heart's content. Because now we move on to Super Mario Wonder, which came out in 2023. This game felt like, yeah guys, we were burnt out on the old style of games, but we decided we're gonna go back to the drawing board and make it innovative, make it weird. We're gonna do 2D different than anyone has ever done 2D before. And oh boy, did they. The elephant power-up alone is all you need to know about this game, and I have said this in the past. Elephant Mario is crazy. Elephant Luigi, Peach, Daisy. You can play multiplayer and with a bunch of different characters, not just Mario, for the first time by yourself. The big gimmick of this game that makes the linearity useful is the actual Wonder Seed and Wonder Flowers that make the levels different. I don't mind if the objective is just getting to the end of something and getting through obstacles on the way there, as long as the world around me is beautiful, is fun, makes sense, and at the same time is trying to be different. And let me tell you, there is nothing out there like Mario Bros. Wonder. This game is unapologetically weird. I love every single thing about Mario Wonder. I love Bowser being weirder than ever, and it's not actually Bowser you fight. He's like this big weird ship at the same time as existing as a thing. I don't know what that's about, but it's really cool. All of the enemies are like supercharged and kind of weird because of the Wonder Flower. Just everything about this game is so odd and incredible. Every single level you go to, you don't know what you're going to do. Whereas in New Soup, you know exactly what's going to happen in every single level. Turning into a spike ball, turning into an elephant with a power-up like I said earlier. The basic power-ups are also back, like fireballs and such. Then, you also never know if you're going to turn into other things or if the level around you is going to transform. So it's not just creativity in what you play as, or who you're playing as, or where you're playing at, but everything around you and everything you use that is different. Mario Wonder, Mario Odyssey, and yes, Mario Maker 2 absolutely saved Mario's legacy on the Nintendo Switch and transformed what was a bland decade of the same old into something beautiful, something unique, something that other developers have been trying to copy for the last 5, 7, 8 years. Mario feels like he's back better than ever because they decided to get rid of the idea of quantity over quality and focused on actually making games when they had good ideas for them. Of course, Mario will always be in development. He sells too well and is too iconic to not have games constantly being made, but I think now they're taking way more time to develop these games. And of course, I'm talking about mainline games specifically. You could count 3D World and Bowser's Fury, and that would continue to add to my idea even more with Bowser's Fury being so unique. An open world type platformer in which you're running away from this big Bowser in the center of the map. Oh, how cool and creative. It's great that they also didn't make that into an entire game, because I think after like 15 to 20 hours, I would get pretty bored of the idea of Bowser continually chasing me across all these lands. It was just perfect as a different game mode with 3D World. But still, it was creative, it was innovative, it was completely and totally different than anything the industry has ever seen before. And at its roots, that is what Mario has always been. He has shattered the idea of what people think a game can be and broke every single boundary you could imagine. I believe the Nintendo Switch brought him back to what he was always supposed to be: fun, creative, and innovative. That is why I believe the Nintendo Switch saved Mario's legacy. So, if you think the same thing, if I changed your mind, or if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below exactly why you think that, and consider liking this video and subscribing to join the madness. Click that notification bell to know exactly when my videos come out. It really helps the channel to click all those buttons. Consider joining my membership program to get early access to videos just like this and to support me as an individual person and creator. I would super appreciate that. If you want to watch more videos about me gushing about this beautiful Mario series, click on the left side of the screen to watch my 3D Mario retrospective. And if you want more deep dives into individual games, click on the right playlist to watch my reviews and specific game discussions. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. You are amazing and I appreciate your support. Have a beautiful day. My name is Ray. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk, and I will see you all in the next video.